Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Malicious Compliance. Story 1. So I guess you don't want any candy. OBS, this is being reposted because mods said I broke a community rule, so I fixed the problem. Pointed warnings, English is not my first language, this happened outside the US. TLDR, student tries to be a smart A and religiously prejudiced, ends up with no candy. Background: in my country there are some African religions spread all over, and the Catholics used those marking because I very much doubt they truly hold the values of Christianity in their day-to-day lives, if it is not convenient, are quite in the habit of marking anything as evil or tainted if it is even remotely connected to those religions, even if it's a plain copy of what they also do or celebrate. I am a teacher in the public system of my country, dealing with students from 6 to 16 years of age. This happened about 6 years ago. A particular 7th grade class, ages 12 to 14, had a student that always wanted attention. He was rude, made jokes at any time, bothered others, you know, that type of class clown. For this story, let's call the student Adam, not his real name of course. It was coming close to a federal holiday called Children's Day, and I decided to take advantage of that to explain in class about Halloween. It is not a holiday here. The school I teach was close to a big market that sold things in bulk, so I decided to use a lunch break and do shopping for that. I came back to school with a cardboard box full of candy, and Adam saw me arriving then. He loudly asked if those were Macumba candy. Macumba is one of the African religions I mentioned, but the name is usually said in a derogatory manner that gives it evil vibes, making sure that everyone was looking at us. Before I could even answer, he continued saying that he was Catholic and will not eat any Macumba candy. Then went walking and laughing like it was the coolest thing he could have said. Cue malicious compliance with a bit of petty revenge perhaps? You guys decide. I did not have enough money to give Halloween candy for all my classes, but I did intend to give any leftover candy to another class that day, which happened to be his class. I gathered all leftover bags with chocolate, hard candy, lollipops, sweet popcorn, chewing gum, chewing candy, and other types of sugary treats, put it all together in one big bag and left them with the class representatives, telling them to distribute to their classmates but to not give it to Adam, since he said that he didn't want any. And to also keep it hidden so it would not disturb the other teachers' classes. Adam looked quite angry at the ring of the last bell for some reason that day. Story 2. Nice urban neighborhood. I parked my Vanagon, 1986, up on ramps to change out the gas tank a few years ago. The seals on those old things give out with time. Anyway, I was missing a part, so it stayed up on the ramps for a couple of days. My neighbor complained anonymously and the city came out and left a notice that it had to be moved. So I reinstalled the gas tank and drove that thing right up on my front lawn, back up on ramps. Fixed it the next day when the part came in, but left it there for a week. When I saw my suspected Karen at the park walking her dogs, I told her, if I ever get that kind of shit again, I'll put a couch on my front lawn and start drinking my beer and practicing my banjo out there. Never had another complaint out of her. Story 3. No more overtime, okay boss, whatever you say. Years ago, I used to work for a plastic injection company in my hometown. It wasn't a huge company, but they had 2 plants in my state, 2 in 2 other states, 1 in the UK and 1 in Germany. So not small either. It was a 2-4-HR production facility, which means the machines run 24/7 except from December 23 to January 2. I was one of 2 delivery drivers who moved finished product from the plant to a nearby warehouse, and brought raw materials and packaging supplies back to the plant. On a good day I'd get 4 to 5 back and forth trips done in a 12-hour day. On my last run back to the warehouse, I'd always go around to the floor people and make sure they had what they needed to make it, though the night driver was the only floor position that wasn't 24 hours, so that nothing would shut down. Well, sometimes they would forget something and after my last run I'd have to go back. I wasn't complaining, I got an hour or 2 of overtime every few shifts and everything ran fine. One day my supervisor pulls me aside and says I need to stop taking overtime. I explain why and he doesn't care. No more overtime. I say okay, and we go on with our day. Near the end of my next shift, I am 15 minutes shy of being able to clock out and I am just finishing packing up the truck to do the next morning run, when one of the floor people comes over and tells me he forgot something. I say, sorry, no can do. I'm not allowed any more overtime to go and pick up the material. Apparently, if I didn't do it, 3 machines would shut down overnight. If any of you have ever worked in plastic injection, you know those machines get so hot they melt the plastic being injected. If they have no material flowing in them, they have to get shut down or they will get too hot. It can take hours for them to cool down, and they have to be started from a cold state when you go to reboot them. So if it runs out of material, production has to stop, the machines has to take about 10 to 12 hours to cool down and then heat back up. This is all very unfortunate, but I've got to follow orders. So I clock out and go home. The next morning rolls around and I am called into the plant supervisor's office. He is my supervisor's boss and is one of the owners of the entire company. He is shaking mad, because just as my coworker predicted, 3 machines shut down overnight and were going to be out of commission until nearly 2 p.m. that afternoon. He was going to fire me on the spot but gave me a chance to explain myself. When I told him what I used to do, and what my supervisor had told me to do, he let out a big sigh and told me to go back to the floor, and that if I need to take overtime to keep machines from going offline, to just do it from now on. Shortly after that, my supervisor was called into his office. Now unfortunately, he is the son of one of the other owners so they didn't fire him, but I never got yelled at about overtime ever again. Edit. I forgot to include the fact that I later found out that my little stunt cost the company something like $3,000/HR in lost production over the course of like an entire day, because one the machine's heating coils broke when it cooled down and had to be replaced, so all in all I cost them tens of thousands of dollars. Guess it was easier just to pay me time and a half for a few hours every pay. Story 4. Try to come up with a similar casket replacement. Enjoy spending more corporate. Pardon the format. I'm on mobile. So, I'm a mortician at a small mom and pop type funeral home, or at least it used to be. The owner passed away and it was purchased by a new corporation which has been a complete nightmare. In the state where I live, each funeral home has to have an arrangement room with a small display of each casket that we sell, and according to state funeral regulations, each of those caskets must remain in stock. This has not been a problem until recently. Corporate does not like us to keep ordering more caskets to keep in stock. Well, fine. Then L will just send my transport team to the nearest city to pick up caskets at the warehouse. I thought corporate would be fine with this. They were not. Last week, they called to yell at me and tell me to just use what we have in stock locally and sell it at the same cost as the caskets that are being picked up by my transport team. Fine. Here is where the malicious compliance comes into play. We have a specific blue casket that is highly popular. Unfortunately, we are out of stock. The only similar casket we have at our local warehouse costs $3,000 more and 10 families have ordered them. That means that corporate is now out $30,000. Today, they called me to let me know that it's now okay to send my transport team out of town if we run out of caskets again and to go ahead and order more in the meantime. Corporate FAFO. Story 5. Update, I'm not allowed to get water. Okay. First of all, hello again. I'm the idiot that almost died to prove a point. Before I continue, to all of you who were concerned about my safety and health, thank you. I never realized how many would care. I'd also like to apologize for literally putting my own life in danger to prove a point. It was stupid. My family, the nurses, my girlfriend, and many of you made me realize just how stupid I was, and I will be more careful in the future. I am now out of the hospital after being completely stabilized and I don't have any major trauma from this ordeal. So don't worry. Anyway, for those of you not in the loop, check my profile for the previous post. For those of you who already know, let's get into this. A lot of things happened so far. My aunt, the main nurse assigned to me, and the nurses I knew personally all cussed me out for what I did and told me to make sure I better get health and safety to invade my job for this. My aunt put me in contact with a representative and I had a lengthy chat with said representative. This got the ball rolling for investigations to start. What I didn't expect was that even police had to get involved. I was released from the hospital after a day and was told that I could work, but I was entitled to 10-minute breaks every hour if the temperature rose above 25°C indoors. Which, basically is every hour of the day. Anyway, I clocked in today and was immediately approached by a man and woman in high-vis and hard hats. The woman introduced herself as the representative I had spoken to on the phone, and she basically asked me to backtrack and explain in detail what happened. I did, and she wrote everything down and let me be on my way, after reminding me to abuse my medical papers as much as I felt like. Dunno why. She just said that and walked away. Didn't hear much more after that. The entire company was called into a large meeting about personal safety. And it was quickly established that I was the cause of said safety meeting. Whoops. Anyway, we were informed that Kyle, the dillweed manager, had been demoted to a normal worker, and that we would be entitled to 5-minute breaks every hour due to the heat. Nice. He also said that due to the heat, the company would be purchasing drink coolers, fans, and would be compensating any worker that had to go home due to illness prompted by the heat. This part though, shocked me. Frost is not allowed in any engine bay until winter due to temperatures and there being close to a sauna. We don't need him to almost die twice to understand his condition is severe. Basically, anywhere the heat rises above 30°C, I am not allowed in for my own safety. That's as far as this situation has come. Once again to those who were worried about me. Thank you, and I'm sorry for making you worry about someone like me. Thank you for your time. Story 6. You're so obsessed with how I dress that you're going to involve HR. Alright, let's get a supervisor involved and see how that goes for you. I work at a hospital that doubles as a research institution. Since I'm on the research side, I have to involve lots of other departments, and most people with whom I work with are very chill and understand that I have to beseech them for things to do my job. I'm one of those she can go 100 hectares on a single tank of kerosene type of people, and I'm very on top of things, for which my co-workers value me. However, the one place where that camaraderie breaks down is with some of the nurses who work in my specific clinic, focusing on one particular disease. Honestly, I've done a good job making most of the nurses like me. I bring them homemade treats sometimes, and I'm always extra friendly and approbative with them. Some of them have their days regardless, and I put up with them. Right after I first started working in that specific clinic, unfortunately, one nurse in particular, let's call her Bitch L, had decided that I was on her blacklist. Bitch L hates doing work. She's like a kid playing Xbox when their parent asks them for help with groceries. She'll moan and groan, and if she helps at all, it's with an angsty indignation. I needed a series of blood tubes drawn in clinic for a patient one morning, instead of down in phlebotomy protocol rules more complicated and stupid than it's worth getting into here, and Bitch L was the only nurse available. She was extremely put off at my asking her to draw this protocol kit, despite my giving advance notice to clinic that this needed to be done. She clearly did not want to leave her computer, which was not open to anything work-related, but she begrudgingly went and drew the tubes. She was unnecessarily profusely thanked by me, just for doing her damn job. I came back down later to get a prescription signed for another patient, and a different nurse asked me what I'd done to upset Bitch L because she'd apparently been going off about me to anyone who would listen. I explained what had happened. The other nurse informed me that Bitch L was pissed at me, and also felt my outfit, a white medical coat, a modest blouse, work pants, and high heel boots, was too provocative. What? I just decided to let it go and try to avoid bitch L as much as possible. This did not work. I kept running into situations where the other nurses were busy seeing patients. I was forced to walk back into the nurse triage room, which is off limits to patients, and ask bitch L to draw 2 more of these blood kits in the next month. She was never happy to see me, and she was always wasting time on her work computer when I entered the room. Maybe 2 or 3 days after that last kit draw, my supervisor called me in her office to discuss my presentation. She very nicely, and with pity in her voice, told me she'd received a report about my dress habits in patient-facing spaces. She said she personally hadn't noticed anything, no shit, but was obligated to discuss this with me anyhow. I assured her I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought about confronting bitch L, but decided not to because, you know, loose cannon and whatnot. After a brief reminder of the dress code, I figured that at least it was over. It was not over. 2 weeks later, and I hadn't even asked anyone to draw any kits. In the interim, a formal report was filed against me for my conduct in clinic. This went to the hospital, and then my supervisor, who, even after reading the report, seemed totally clueless about what it could mean. I explained what had been happening with bitch L. But then my supervisor told me a second person had reported this as well, on the same day as who was obviously bitch L. This time, it was a patient. The patient had reported that I was dressing improperly for a patient-facing environment. Whoa 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 whoa. I asserted that I wasn't, but I was nonetheless put on probation, which meant that my supervisor, against her will, now had to come with me when I saw patients in clinic for the foreseeable future, and a nurse manager would have to accompany both of us when she was free, since I was dressing provocatively in patient-facing spaces and that was her domain. But as you can likely guess from her browsing habits, bitch L was not the sort of person who needed more supervisors in her area. Cue malicious compliance. Fine, you want to punish me and force me to work in the eyesight of the supervisors? All right, let's get some supervisors down here as quickly as possible. My next in-clinic patient came in 2 days, and it was one of those stupid timed in-clinic protocol kit visits, which meant I was forced to ask one of the nurses to draw the patient's blood. I informed my supervisor and we set off down for clinic. The nurse manager was in that day, so she accompanied the 2 of us. We all went back into the triage room so that I could ask for help with the blood draw. Bitch L and one other nurse were there. What we saw upon entering was the other nurse entering vital signs for a patient into our health database, and bitch L sitting at her desk with an online clothing retailer open on one monitor, and Facebook on the other. I asked for bitch L's help drawing the kit, and she sighed heavily and spun around to see 2 higher UPS looking on with disdain at her work computer. In embarrassment, she swiveled back and closed those 2 tabs, which revealed "You can't make this stuff up," a website for marital aids that had been open in another tab, about which bitch L had clearly forgotten until now. I just smiled and handed her the bag like nothing had happened. In the hall, my supervisor and the nurse manager were talking about bitch L's display just now. Apparently, she had previously been warned about goofing off at work. The nurse manager told the supervisor that she was going to check all of bitch L's work computer activity, which I actually didn't know any supervisor could readily access. What followed was so incredibly beautiful that I hope it made the ending of this long post worth waiting for. According to the nurse who'd initially asked me what I had done to upset bitch L, her activity was searched. She was revealed to have been spending hours upon hours every day browsing the web, shopping, and using social media. Since she had been previously warned about this behavior, she was given a formal write-up. But this was just the beginning. The day after the 3 of us went down to clinic, my supervisor called me in her office again. She told me that bitch L had fabricated the patient complaint about me and posted it from her work computer. How did they learn this? Oh, that'd be because she saved a draft of the message that reported me to the hospital, and she'd accessed the patient complaint/comment web page the same day. My supervisor sincerely apologized for the hassle and told me I was no longer on probation. As for bitch L, apparently fearing the worst, she put her 2 weeks' notice in the same day after getting wind that she was in some far more serious trouble. For reasons I will never understand as long as I live, the hospital chose to let her quit after 2 weeks instead of firing her on the spot. Maybe they knew what a nightmare she was and were comfortable letting her quit on her own accord. It's not as though she was due to glean any glowing references from this experience. Maybe they just wanted some extra work. Our clinic was very short-staffed for nurses at the time. In any case, they chose not to fire her and let her quit on her own. On Bichel's last day, I ventured down to the triage room to retrieve some outside records from their printer. When I entered, Bichel was alone and browsing Glassdoor. I unbuttoned my white coat and told her, "Hey, good luck with your next job. I hope the employees are less provocative." She slowly spun around with a scowl on her face. Then I lifted my dress up to my neck, flashed her my bare tits, and walked out, and I never saw Bichel again. Dr. Setup, I run drug trials at a research hospital. A clinic nurse decided she hated me because I made her do her job and, she claimed, dressed provocatively. She made a formal report against me, and then a patient one surfaced. I was put on probation and made to see all patients with supervisors. Dr. Resolution/malicious compliance, I brought supervisors down as quickly as possible. Said supervisors found out the nurse had been spending many hours a day on non-work related websites, and the patient report against me turned out to have been fabricated by the same nurse. She quit in disgrace, and on her last day, I gave her a nice parting gift. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.